Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. Today's review, we're going to be looking at some AI terms. So the reason we're looking at this at a data privacy law firm is because there are implications on privacy that influence artificial intelligence. Now, there's many different ways that I could articulate this, but essentially, if you're using AI in some capacity, there's going to be an overlap with personal data. And how personal data is utilized by a company, there are laws associated with use. So what we do at the firm is we look at how a business uses personal data and we interpret what their obligations are. This is what you use. This is how you can use it, essentially. It's like any other thing, right? Let's say, for example, I'm just going to give this analogy. If you are an organization and you want to form an entity in Delaware, there's a specific way in which business formation happens in Delaware. So what do? You go online and you look at the rules. This is what to do, this is what to do, this is what to do. Same with personal data. Here's my business. We want to sell a baby monitor. These are the personal data elements associated with the baby monitor we're trying to create. Now there's laws attached to it. What do the laws say and how can we use the personal data? Same with business formation. Okay, so we've got this excellent decline. AI terms. So I'm just going to take a quick look. Let's have a look at the solutions. I just want to see the products and services because it influences what terms of service are going to be. Terms of service associated with the service, or what is the service? Okay, so it finds and summarizes information. You don't have to search through your drives, folders, and files. Quickly find and summarize information from across the company. You don't have to sift through everything yourself. Cool. Oh, wow. Providing specific sources. Wow. Interesting. Use the field below to enter questions about your Workspace document. My question would be, I'm not going to go into this too much, but what would be the difference between Workspace chat, I guess, and, Copilot? Because there are, Copilot has similar functionality. That's beside the point. We're looking at the AI terms today. Okay, so I've already seen what the services are. And when I do an intake form with clients, I always ask them two main questions. The first question is geography. That influences the law in play. There are many countries that have artificial intelligence legislation. So that's one. Then many of these countries also have privacy legislation. And like I said at the beginning, there are implications for privacy and AI, that overlap. And then the second question that I ask is, what are your products and services? Because let's say, for example, I was just talking about the analogy with the baby monitor. A baby monitor is not going to collect social security number. So if your business collects social security numbers for its products and services, your obligations under the data protection law are going to be very different to those for a baby monitor. Each identifier has its own obligation. You got to sift through that. And if you have many products and services, then there's going to be many rules about how you can use that personal data. Okay, so this was effective August 22, 2024. I talked about this in other AI reviews. I would be interested in whether the solution that's offered by this company, Strategy AI, has changed since this time because that influences the terms of service. These really should be reviewed on an annual basis. We're now in December 2025, so it's a little bit over a year. So I think this is something that should be on the radar for this company. If you're only using the services in your capacity as a Strategy AI view-only user, you are only agreeing with the terms described in sections 1, 2, 5, 9, 14, and 15. Interesting. So it seems like the capabilities of the tools offered by this company can be restricted to view-only user. That tells me that there's certain data points that might not be processed if you're a view-only user and then if you are a user in another capacity. That's really important, and I love that this is placed at the top because I talk a lot about scope in all of my reviews for the privacy notices and the cookie notice, but scope is really important. Essentially, what they're trying to say is they're trying to scope it out. If you're an AI view-only user, you don't need to look at everything. You don't need to look at 3 because it doesn't apply to you, which is really useful if you are a consumer and you want to know what's in scope, what applies to me. Instead of going through the whole thing, you can pinpoint the provisions that are applicable to you. I like this sentence a lot. As used herein, the term you, your, and user refer to the individual or entity that is using or accessing the services. Now, I want to call mention to this sentence because it's really important. The responsibilities that Strategy AI is going to have to an entity may be different to those of an individual. Because when we look at personal data, we're looking at the data that identifies an individual. If you're an entity, let's say, for example, we can use my law firm as an example. I, Funmi Owolabi, am an individual. My law firm, the Data Privacy PLLC, is an entity, right? It is not a human being. You can identify it, but it's not an individual. The data protection laws protect an individual. a data subject. That's the official legal terminology, but it's interchangeable with individual. My business is not an individual. My business has no ramifications under the data protection laws. However, if you put together my name, Funmi Owolabi, and then you also put my law firm under there, the Data Privacy PLLC, and then you add my business phone number, all three together identify me. So then it becomes personal data. I hope that distinction makes sense. And I've called this out because I don't think I've seen this before in a review that I've done. And I think businesses sometimes think, oh, it's just business data. Business data can still identify an individual if you put it together with other identifiers. So it's really important. I talked about this. The geography is important, but then also understanding the products and services. It seems like there's lots of different products and services available for the products that Strategy AI has. Because not only do they have the option for you to be a view-only user, they also have offerings for individuals, privacy implications, entities, depending on how it's used, but the obligations for an entity could bleed over into individual if we're putting the identifiers together. I don't want to spend too much on that. Let's get to the AI terms. The privacy policy at this URL, and if applicable, our data protection processing agreement at Exhibit A governs the services, including any personal data or personally identifiable information you provide to us. I like this a lot. And the inclination that I have, I don't know this for a fact, is the reason they've made the distinction here is because different geographies use different terminology in the legislation. Personal data is language that is more Eurocentric. Personally identifiable information is definitely US-centric. This gives me an inclination that the services Strategy AI provides are offered in Europe and in the US. Now, I can't know that for a fact without, becoming their counsel, but essentially that's the inclination I get from the work that I've done for a wide variety of clients who have operations globally. Let's take a look. Use of service. Strategy AI user ID. Immediately, I already see personal data. I know it. You need to provide your name, email address, and authentication, e.g. password. I love that this is here. Because some of the questions that I generally get are like, oh, well, the use of our tool only requires a username and password, so it's not personal data. But the data protection laws say anything that can identify an individual is personal data. And we talked about this above with their use of the language individual and entity. The fact that an individual can log into whatever the service or system is with a username and password means that both of those identifiers constitute personal data and have to be treated as such. There's a lot of education that needs to be provided to companies. I really like that their example for authentication was password, because what's happening is Strategy AI recognizes that this constitutes personal data. And a lot of businesses don't recognize this, particularly when they offer SaaS tools and SaaS applications that only collect a username and password. Now, SaaS, for anybody that's not familiar with that acronym, is software as a service. I started this channel to provide education to businesses of all sizes because I feel like some smaller organizations don't recognize that a username and password do constitute personal data. Okay, in order to access or use the services, so you got to provide this to use the service. We recommend that you use your unique email address provided by your organization. Now, I'm interested in why they're making this recommendation, because it doesn't absolve them of obligations under the data protection law, whether it's a business email address or a personal email address. Now, let me tell you why I think this has been made. There is a lot more risk in collecting a personal email address than a business email address, generally because business email addresses are publicly available in the public domain on Google, whereas your personal email address may not be. Now, I don't think that they're trying to absolve themselves of obligations under the data protection laws. I think they're looking at this from a risk perspective, which is something that privacy hinges upon. Privacy is about managing your risk. How can we process personal data to manage our risk? We're going to look at one more term in the AI terms of service. So this tells me that the product and service is being offered in the United States. Let's talk about this. Content files. Content files means Strategy AI provided files, such as videos. And we know that videos, if they have an individual in them, can constitute personal data. Character images. We already know that images constitutes personal data. Illustrations, now I'm not entirely what this constitutes, and that would be something that I would scrutinize. I draft these for a living. So essentially, I need to be able to understand every identifier or every data point that could constitute personal data. Now, it may be that the illustrations aren't personal data, but that would be something that the company would need to give me insight into. I need to be able to understand every data point, because we need to be able to manage the business's risk and be able to understand what the obligations are. I don't know if an illustration is personal data, but an illustration of what? And that would be a question that I would ask. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. I love looking at what different businesses are doing. If your business is looking for privacy counsel and you want to manage or build a privacy program, take a look at my description below, and I'll see you in another video.